Welcome everyone. I'm going to start this presentation, and the main purpose of this presentation, or our starting point, is to ask what is surveillance, and we want to rethink surveillance through sound and music. Now, doing that is difficult because depictions in popular culture, the definition of surveillance as watching over, media depictions, and also academic research have laid mostly the emphasis on the visual and notions of watching. Now, the typical image when talking about surveillance, which is often given, is the Panopticon, which was a prison thought out by Jeremy Bentham. For those of you who are not aware of this, the idea is that you have the guard in the tower in the middle, who you cannot see as a prisoner, and the prisoners are in a circle around the central tower. The idea is that even though the prisoners do not see the guard, they will behave. Another example, there's another Panopticon, is Orwell's book 1984, Big Brother is watching you, even popular music with the police singing about I'll be watching you. And then the emergence of CCTV cameras, especially in the UK in the 1990s, has influenced popular depictions and also academic research on surveillance very much, focusing on watching. Now, however, surveillance was never purely visual, and even Jeremy Bentham, when he was thinking about his Panopticon prison, devised a listening system, but he decided not to do it because technologically it was not possible to have a listening system that was one way. Okay, so, now, so surveillance was never meant to be purely visual, and so eavesdropping is the most well-known form where it's not about watching but about listening. But there are also other types of Yep, I'm going too fast. Other types of acoustic surveillance or surveillance through sound and music. Now, in the 1930s, we see that Muzak emerged. And Muzak was created to specifically influence people's behavior, for example, at work. So, designing music to make people work more efficiently, for example. Then also in the 1930s, we have the emergence of the radio and specific radio programs with the idea that certain population groups are targeted by what is offered through music, and so this should be, we can see this in developments in the 1930s with the rise of the number of corporations working around marketing and marketing strategies. Now, a more recent example of where sound and music is used to influence people's behavior is what is known as mosquito, which is a sound apparently only people up till a certain age can hear. And the idea is that, for example, in train stations, they don't want to have young people hanging around, so they give this sound so that they will run away. I know that in Brussels, for example, they also use classical music for this purpose. And so these are just a number of ways that music and sound has been used to influence people. And now I'm going to give the floor to Gloria.
I just love you guys. I love you all down. I want to cry. You have a new message waiting. Love you. See ya.
Yes, thank you. So we were listening to a piece of music of an artist called Scanner. He used to make music by invading people's privacy. He used to just scan around him and see what confidential communications he could hack, and then use this as a sound for his music, for his art. So it is actually by listening to this kind of music and trying to think surveillance through sound that we came to the conclusion that perhaps it was better to focus on the relation between surveillance and music. So of all the relations between surveillance and sound, we try to use our paranoid ear, that's a notion by Seth Cluet, to think about music and surveillance. And actually, it appeared that we were not the first ones. There were more people that had been thinking about the relation between surveillance and music. This is Jacques Attali, a French thinker, and he wrote one of the most influential books on modern music. He wrote the first version at the end of the 70s, and he had this very clear reference to the fact that the technologies of surveillance, the technologies of music, are related to the technologies of surveillance. So he emphasized there's a link between surveillance, the music as we know it, and the surveillance through technology. Actually, it was not the only one to have this kind of insights about the nature of modern music. This is Adorno, a German thinker, of course, and he was originally from Germany. He moved to the United States, and he basically just did not like at all jazz. He did not like at all popular music, but it was not only just that he disliked them, but he really saw the seeds of fascism in modern music, in popular music, in standardization of music, and also in jazz. Actually, you can think, well, maybe classical music is better, so that's Adorno against popular music, but actually classical music is not philosophically much better. There's a famous sociologist, Max Weber, who just pointed out that the piano itself is a piece of furniture, a bourgeois piece of furniture. So there is indeed a link between the societies in which we live, the technologies that we use for music. Another thinker that has been emphasizing this is Kittler, and in his case, his comments were more specific about rock music, pop music, and he explained that actually most of the technologies that we use, that were used in the classical records for rock music, for pop music, for instance in Abbey Road, are directly derived from advances in technology made during the war effort in the Second World War. So when you think about singing Imagine a Little War, There's No People and all this, you are actually using strategies that are really clearly related to war. Indeed, when we think, when we look at the technologies of music, of modern music as such, we do see this kind of links. This is Teremin. He was a Soviet spy. He came from the Soviet Union. He lived for a while in the United States. He invented this theremin instrument. I don't know if you know what's the sound of this theremin instrument. You probably know that it does a sound like, it's a strange sound, and it's played without touching the instrument. So actually what he invented was a use of waves. And because of this invention actually was used directly for surveillance purposes, he also invented, with the same kind of technology, the microphone without cable, so the bag that actually played a very important role during the Cold War, and he also contributed to the invention of the Moog keyboard, which was very influential for the whole development of electronic music as we know it. So there is clearly a link in theory, there is clearly a link in history between surveillance and music. But what about now? What happens? Is this link still a reality? And actually we are kind of lucky because this important French thinker, Jacques Attali, he rewrote his book from the 70s when the internet appeared. He thought it was important to actually describe what the internet meant for music and society. And he rewrote this book, and actually, I think this is very, very interesting. He deleted the sentence that I liked. So the sentence where he described the relation between surveillance and technology was mysteriously deleted from this new version of the book. So I'm trying to make you be a bit paranoid, to stimulate your paranoid ear, and also stimulate your paranoid thinking. What does it mean? Does it mean that we are no longer in a society where there's a link between music and surveillance? Yes, and of course, we believe it's not the case. We believe this link is stronger than ever. In the previous session, there was a discussion about online music streaming services and the different ways actually through which we consume all music. This can be online streaming services as such, but also just services like YouTube or any other service. And there were some references to the question of what happens to your data when you go online and hear and listen to music. So what happens to your data? Indeed, to know a bit of what happens to your data, you have to read the terms and conditions, the policy, the privacy policies of the services, and I made this work for you. This is why I'm now a bit feeling bad, but during a few days I was just trapped in a place reading terms and conditions and reading privacy policies of online music services, and I will try to summarize everything in a very quick way. So there is some data that you will always give whenever you listen to music online. There's kind of no escape. It depends on the service. This is a summary of the service, but probably you will need to give your name, your username, your age, your email, your broad location, the country you live in, the gender, most probably at least a pic. Also, you will have to give some technical information, IP address, browser info, some information about the ads that you're seeing, the ads that you're clicking, because that's very, very relevant for the services. You will, of course, have to give a lot of information about the music you are listening to, and for how long, when are you listening to the music. In some cases, you will also be obliged to give information about whether you're running or you're still. This Spotify said it's very important to know what kind of music you want to hear, because you don't want to hear the same music when you run and when you're sitting. So they have to know all the time whether you're running or sitting. That's their view. And in some cases, with some services, you're not obliged to give all that info at the beginning, or you can also then give more info just if you want to. That's opt-in. Also, they ask you, please, could you, by the way, give us more data? And then, indeed, you can give more data, more pics. You can give more specific information about your location, your contacts, and all this information. Now, this takes some time, and of course, you're not obliged to do all this because there's an easier thing to do. You just give them access to your Facebook account so they can get almost all the data directly from Facebook. It's very, very convenient. You may also decide actually to log in through Google, or you can just give them all the data and the access to your Google account and the access to your Facebook account. But these, of course, will have implications on what happens to the data. What happens to all the data? This is the second part of the privacy policies that I suffer reading. So what happens to this data? What is the purpose of this collection of the data? The data will, of course, go to the provider of the service. That can be Spotify, that can be Bandcamp, that can be Deezer, whatever. They will use it to give you some recommendations and some music. The data will also be given to other companies with which they have partnerships. Most of the time it will be used for scientific purposes, that is to know more about you, the audience, what happens in a country, so all these kind of statistics. If you logged in through Facebook, of course, all the data, many items will go to Facebook, so that's always the case. And of course, a lot of data will go to Google if you logged in through Google, and actually even if you didn't. And we heard in the session before, there was somebody saying, as the boss of my company, I can guarantee you that I will never, as long as I live, sell your data to anybody. That's always there in the privacy policies of everybody. That's at the beginning of the privacy policies. We promise you, we cherish your data, we will never sell it. And then when you go to the end, page 80 of the privacy policy, it does say that if necessary, if we don't have any more money, of course, we will first just sell your data so we can get some money. So that's a summary of what happens to your data. And you may wonder, well, I thought there were some privacy settings. So maybe that's not as serious as it looks. I can still influence this. Indeed, there are some privacy settings, but they cannot really protect you for much of this. They will basically protect you from the way in which you share this. The data is shared with other companies. You will still, most of the time, share the data with Facebook, with Google, with Spotify, of course, and if somebody needs money, with anybody. So there was a little song that I want you to listen. If I get it. So basically, that was just a musical interlude to tell you we are becoming data. We are constantly being data. And we are constantly being transformed into data by listening to music. So this raises the question, what is then the role for music in the critique of surveillance? Can we actually make some interesting music to denounce surveillance, to complain about the invasions of privacy? And actually there is interesting music that is out there. This is one example, it's Holly Hernon. She has this beautiful video, it's a love song to an NSA expert. So this was following the Snowden revelation. She knows that whenever she's online, there is possibly somebody, the National Security Agency in the United States, looking at what she does. So she wrote this love song to the NSA, and she has this beautiful video that you can go and watch in YouTube. But of course, if you go and watch the video on YouTube, you know you will be tracked. There's another interesting video also, and that's Anony Watch Me Again. It's a bit the contrary of a love song. It's a hate song against surveillance that you can go and watch online. But so how can you then escape being surveyed while you critique surveillance? This is one of the big questions that we would like to explore with you. This is one of the set of questions that we would like to explore. And for the second set of questions, Rosamunde comes back.
So to conclude, our final question is, what does this mean for our initial question? What is surveillance? Is music surveillance? I think we have shown that surveillance is, in the sense of the dictionary, is not just watching over, but can include other senses such as the ear. I think we've shown that with the rise of the internet and internet surveillance and the music software that is increasingly being used to listen to music, that the users of these programs are becoming disciplined in a sense, similarly in a sense as in the Panopticon, to always provide their data wherever they go, and specifically with music, they are seduced into always giving their data as a matter of speaking, as a normal. Giving your data becomes a normal way of life. I don't know if Gloria wants to add anything to that.
Yes, I think we are very lucky because we have 10 minutes left for 10 minutes left for questions from the audience. So thank you. Thank you. And I don't know if there's a moderator, but please go ahead.
I was first. I'm kidding. I would like to know, do you know anything about the current state of the art? So what is done with the data? Because, of course, everybody knows or assumes there will be algorithms calculating something. person to my listening behavior, but what knowledge or information is drawn from that data? Are there already articles from the technological field where data scientists say people who listen to Pantera are normally very aggressive and mean persons? Or so how deep goes it into the personality of the listeners?
Yes, actually, we don't know much about what happens for real with the data. This is the very frustrating thing about those privacy policies that I was mentioning. So they always tell you, you want to know what happens to your data, go and read those 80 pages, you go and read them, and at the end you really don't know what is this supposed to be, what's the purpose. Indeed, part of it is supposed to make better recommendations for you. But what happens, what is the purpose of the general statistics? My impression, my view, I don't know if Rosamunde disagree, but it's not just because they care for the personality of Pantera listeners. It is, of course, with a commercial purpose. It's all about marketing and giving this actually most of the time to companies that are not about music. It's about demographics, collecting your practices. Where are you? When did you go out? What's the kind of lifestyle that you have? But it's not just sharing your music preferences with other music lovers and you're here with music. Really, Facebook is not in this for the love of music, and also Google is not there. So, but when you look into the literature itself, there's a lot of, yes, the discussions that were before about genre, which kind of, how can we classify, but how can we keep, again, the listener more interested. So we don't want to lose the listener because it's our source of data.
Yeah, I agree. I just wanted to add that I think it's clear that one purpose of, especially, for example, if you log into Spotify with your Facebook profile, the data used by Facebook will most probably be used on the one hand for advertising and on the other hand for doing research, big data research that they're conducting. So.
Any other questions, comments? Yeah, I see.
Yeah, hi, thanks for a fascinating talk. I'm interested in just probing a bit more what are the different angles that are offered by thinking in music and the auditory terms instead of visual. Just one other example is there's a great short story at the time of invention of the radio, the enormous radio, which sort of cues into this sensation of being watched and heard all the time, was heard all the time in that case. But is there something about the physical element there that makes it more real? And I'm just curious whether when we can't see the listening devices, whether we act differently to when it's invisible, like on these various platforms, and just whether you'd thought about that physical distinction as being an element in how people perceive surveillance.
Well, there has been a lot of discussion about this, and of course there is a big difference in if you are obviously being watched by a CCTV camera, or you are listening to music online or on Facebook and not really aware that you are being watched, or in other cases listened to. I think awareness is very important. But the awareness doesn't mean it has to be visual. So being aware that you are being controlled means that you can also have possibilities to interact and resist towards the surveillance. If you're not aware at all, then there's this could also be an awareness of visual surveillance, because you can have cameras that are hidden. I think it's a question that is not dependent on the visual or the auditory, but is a...
But I think that there is indeed a difference, a qualitative difference. And in one of the slides, we had the posters of 3 films. And actually, they were there because there are 3 films about surveillance through eavesdropping. And I think that they're the most beautiful films because you really see the effort of the film directors as visual thinkers trying to explain this pervasiveness and the presence of the listening surveillance. So how can somebody be listening to you and how you can perceive this in a very physical matter? No? At the end, you will have people just breaking things physically because they try to just locate the sound. And also, there are interesting artists now working in sound art, trying precisely to reveal the sounds that are around us. And there is, for instance, this German artist working with electrical flows, electrical hums. So the noises that the electrical appliances and the electrical machines do around us, and making this audible for us, because sometimes what is audible is physical, but not physical enough for us. And that's very interesting, how you can approach the different types of surveillance. So, no more questions, comments, reactions, everybody? Yep. Okay. Rosamunde, last word?
Thank you.
Thank you.